Hey YouTube, how you're going? Just been wanting to put up a few videos over the last couple of days, but unfortunately the hotel I was staying at before, the internet there self-timed out every hour, so I couldn't really upload any videos. Today's video, I just wanted to kind of review my wetsuits that I wore and kind of talk about the pros and cons and what happened. Obviously wetsuits are a major part of your equipment list going into World's Toughest Mudder, and I think it's a pretty important thing to cover. If you've seen my earlier video on my wetsuits, I had the O'Neill Psycho Freak 3.2 and the 4.3, also O'Neill. Both top-of-the-line suits, they retail for $5.50 in Australia. They've got like the firewall technology, which is designed to keep you nice and toasty, and you know the seams are taped, glued, binded, everything like that. So in terms of wetsuit, right up there. I know people tried to use triathlon wetsuits, and from the comments I've seen on Facebook, they are a no-go. 2, 3, 4 people have all mentioned how the tri wetsuits just split along the zips, just because, you know, the demands of running, jumping, crawling, climbing and everything are kind of, I guess, a bit beyond what they're designed for. The surf wetsuits, which the O'Neill are, worked really well for me. No complaints in terms of how the wetsuit performed. In both the 3.2 and the 4.3, I was really warm in my core, right throughout my arms and legs. The only thing that got cold was my hands and feet. They obviously weren't covered by the wetsuit, but I'll talk about those kind of areas in a later video. So for the first 2 laps, I decided to go out just straight running without stopping by my tent. Opted to wear the 3.2 because it wasn't super cold, or I didn't feel super cold, and that worked really well for me. Laps 1 and 2, I wasn't cold at all. The only time my feet got cold was when we went in the water obstacles and had to swim, you know, the 75 meters or 50 meters, whatever it was. Everything else was perfectly fine in terms of warmth. After lap 2, I came into the tent and switched off my, I had like an Under Armour hood and put on a thicker 7mm hood just because it was starting to get a little bit colder, but I did opt to stay in my 3.2 wetsuit. Now, that could have been a really big mistake for me. About halfway through the lap, I did start to get cold. Not so much, again, my core, but just my hands and my feet were getting quite cold, and I think, you know, my core certainly was colder than it was before, but I wasn't like at a shivering stage. As we approached the water obstacles, I did start to get concerned that, you know, if I got even colder, I could then kind of enter that stage where I looked visibly, you know, unwell or cold to the event staff, and they may pull me off the course. So during that time, I did as much as I could to kind of keep my arms and feet warm, just moved them, you know, just swung my arms back and forward and round circles just to keep the blood flow going, and managed to finish the 3rd lap. You know, it's quite a tough lap, and because it was also getting dark at that stage, because the sun goes down fairly early, around 4:30 p.m. On lap 4, I switched into my 4.3. So if I was to do it again, I would do lap 1 and 2 in the 3.2, definitely. But I would change earlier. I'd change on lap 3 into the 4.3 wetsuit, just so when it gets dark, you're already in that warmer suit. Lap 4 was the hardest lap for me because it was cold. Not in the core, the arms or legs, because the 4.3 held up really well, but my hands and feet. The neoprene gloves that I had, you know, on lap 4 were 5mm thick, but I'm sure it was just across the board. No matter what you do, your hands are getting wet, and it's just almost impossible for them to stay warm throughout that entire duration. Socks and the shoes is another issue. I stuck with, you know, wool socks. I've heard people wearing neoprene socks, combinations of socks, smart wool and neoprene, and no one, I think no one really could escape getting cold feet. It was just a matter of keeping moving. And also because it was the middle of the night now, that lap 4 was quite hard, you know, because it was dark and not many people out on the course, and you're starting to get tired. When I came in for lap 4, I decided to have a break, and I stuck the wetsuit into a bag. This is a really good tip. Do not leave your wetsuit outside. or out of a bag. I saw people put wetsuits outside. I don't know if they just finished up with them or whatever, but they froze like solid, and there's no way you'd get back into those things. By putting it in a bag, it stays wet, but it stays warmer wet. I left like my race bib and my a few like gloves or the hood like outside of the bag, and like the race bib in particular was like frozen solid. Luckily it didn't matter because it was on the outside. The gloves were a little bit stiff. Even though they're in the tent, because they're on the ground or against the skin of the tent, they just pick up the frost and kind of go rigid and solid. So definitely put it in a bag. Coming out in lap 5 in the morning, I opted for the 4-3 again. I'd certainly do that again, because I left the tent at about 6 a.m, so it was cold. It did warm up throughout the day, but at no point was I overheating. So the only, I guess, dilemma on that was you do have to put on a wetsuit. Now, if I was to do it again and you had funds that allow it, I would go for 3 wetsuits. I'd go for the 3-2 for the first 2 laps. I'd go for the 4-3 for the middle laps throughout the night, and I'd probably just have another 4-3 for the morning if you were choosing to sleep or end up sleeping. That way you can put on a warmer wetsuit that's not wet. Also with that, I had like skins compression gear underneath, but I only had one set. So I had to put those on in the morning when they were kind of cold and wet, and it didn't affect me too much in terms of body temperature and stuff, but it certainly wasn't the most pleasant thing. So if funds allow, again, I'd get an extra set of that. And as I said, just the tip there with putting things in the plastic bag so that they don't get frost. So they're kind of my tips for wetsuits and the world's toughest mudder and what worked for me. Hopefully for people doing it next year, you can take that on board and incorporate that into your strategy. Listen to what other people say, get a mix of opinions, and go from there. Thanks very much.